So James, welcome. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. We have been doing a ton of research for the last few years about regenerative villages and retreat centers, and we were connected to you by, I think it was Joshua Hughes, right? Mm-hmm. From We Are Black Sheep. And you came with a lot of praise from him, and we're excited to talk to you about your experience and about the software you're working on to kind of reimagine how we're going to look at designing smart villages. So I think the first question I want to ask here is, what needs to change out there in the world, and what is the need that has been created for what you are doing?
Well, I was inspired in a lot of ways in my research for ReGen Villages at Stanford University, which was born as a research initiative that I brought sort of into Stanford from my previous experience with organic, biodynamic, family farm, case study research, and also intentional community eco-villages, co-housing, collaborative information. And in 2012, I think, there was a Rockefeller Foundation research report that was really eye-opening, because essentially it had said that up until 1950, 75% of planet Earth's human population lived in self-sustaining small communities. And that from 1950 until projected 2050, that the opposite was going to happen, that nearly 75% of 10 billion people would be living in these coastal megacities. And I found that to be kind of a terrifying concept, because I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Manhattan, and it's a lovely place. It's a very thankful place to be. If you want a particular kind of rural, regional Indian food delivered at 3:30 in the morning, that can happen if you've got money. But it's also a very brittle place. And when things break in a city environment, they typically break very badly and for a lot of people. And it's very difficult to bring those systems back online. So I felt pretty compelled that the best case for our species, living in flourishing, thriving ways going forward for the next, hopefully, n number of thousands of years, is actually to spread back out of cities, at least a certain percentage of the population, to be able to have the safety and security of strong, regenerative, resilient neighborhood complexes. And then that also paralleled the UN research, which came out in 2013, that basically said the best way to feed 10 billion people is not through big ag. It's actually through small, hyper-local organic farms that restore biodiversity and create this kind of patchwork of, again, localized resiliency. So I was predictive of ReGen Villages and this exodus from cities, but my predictive modeling was more based on climate change anomalies and also economic inequality.
Hard to predict the whole pandemic thing and the desire, the increasive desire to go out to these eco villages just based off of the isolation and job loss in urban environments. It's tough.
The authoritarianism.
Yeah, we've seen such a rise just as kind of a receiving ground at future thinkers of interest in these topics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I try to stay out of that fray as much as possible, and look more towards optimistic solutions, because I really feel like that's the thing that people crave the most. People need hope, and they need guidance towards that hope. So that's really the focus that I've had for a long time in my life, because I've seen what's possible. Hey, I've seen these kinds of barren, desertified areas that have been restored and brought back to these sort of oasis of blossoming, fruiting, thriving areas that support humanity. So I know that's what's possible.
Can you give some examples of that? Actually, that's a kind of a great place to start here. We've heard stories of that as well. and it's so encouraging.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories, and I have it in my presentation, is about an eco-village in southern India called Oroville. It's about 100 kilometers south of Chennai. And in the mid-1970s, a small group of people came together as part of a group underwritten in some ways by a global eco-village network, GEN. And they were inspired about creating a spiritual community, but also a community that could be self-sustaining. And in the course of from the mid-1970s until today, they have restored approximately 2,500 circular hectare of land from desert into lush greenery that has become its own microclimate.
Wow.
It brings its own rain. They have 3,000 full-time residents. They entertain over 500,000 visitors each year. And they're capable of feeding people, hydrating people, empowering them with renewable energy, and digesting waste. So it's a low-tech solution, but it proves that over a period of n number of years, that you can create these circumstances for restoration that then provides critical life support for people who live in those areas. So, and there's really a lot of examples of this. There's another example from India of one person, one man, who spent 29 years by himself walking into this place that had been denuded of trees. And over 29 years, he just started planting by himself, just planting trees there. In 29 years, he has restored 550 hectare, which is an area, I mean, it's unimaginable, but essentially, again, it's a microclimate. It brought the water and restorative, kind of capability for aquifers again, and elephants came, and tigers came, and the monkeys came, and the birds came, and the pollinators came, and he created a lush forest that is now in benefit and service to the local villages, because now they have these restored aquifers, and they have nutrition that they can gain from the forest. So there's a lot of examples where an individual can make a huge difference over a period of time. Now, imagine if you brought enough people together focusing on these sort of lily pads of self-sustaining communities, then we could get to a place where we kind of used to be on planet Earth, where we had what we needed, but also we actually overproduced certain things. And that's what created sort of new economic models, because we could then go to the town square, to the piazza, and barter and trade and sell our surplus for things that we didn't have, or that we weren't cultivating.
I've heard several stories in the East of this happening, but not so much in the West. And I'm wondering if there's kind of an issue with the way our society is set up, or the fact that there are a lot of projects taking the kind of individual grassroots approach, but there's not really a huge industrial movement. Can you speak to that a bit?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think really what it comes down to is, at the end of the day, there are powerful forces that have control, and they're either landowners, they're district scale utilities, pretty much locked in to pre-existing economic models. It's material companies. It's folks who are used to the pre-industrial model, or industrial model of pre-COVID, let's say, of rinse and repeat real estate development. And so the idea of looking at a piece of land, let's say looking at 50, 60 acre parcel of land, instead of looking at taking 2/3 of that land grant and making it a permaculture flourishing life support system for the 20 acres that is for density for housing, that instead what they do is they look at the full 60 acres to put as much housing as they possibly can on every square foot or every square meter that they possibly can, and maximize greed, essentially. Now, I understand there's a housing crisis, and I understand we have to find more housing for people, but we have to do it in a way that it works within nature, not separate from it. And I think we're really suffering from that a great deal in the West, and our culture in the West has a long way to kind of come back to how things used to be.
The brand new Future Thinkers members portal is now live. Develop your sovereignty and self-knowledge with our in-depth courses, get access to our weekly sense-making calls, join the Q&As with past podcast guests, and much more. Become a Future Thinkers member today at futurethinkers.org/members. Enter the Future Thinkers giveaway and win our brand new community membership, including in-depth courses, private calls, and more, as well as a supply of Qualia, a complete cognitive upgrade for your brain. To enter the contest, simply go to futurethinkers.org/giveaway and sign up for our mailing list to instantly get our 50-page guide on how to adapt to the future. There are many ways to increase your chances of winning. Enter the competition today.